Good evening, good morning, and welcome to the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. Absolutely 100% live every single time. That's my car dealer promise to you.
It's going to come with a full service, sir. Absolutely. And that warranty is as good as they get.
How are we all?
You're coming live from my wife's office here at home, so please excuse the girly decor around you. This is not my normal stomping ground, but it was a nice, quiet place to record this morning, this evening.
You mean not record, live? Yeah, live.
Yeah, live. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
But like
it's always live for me, and I'm in my same. It's always live for me, and I'm in my same location. Retired man can be.
We don't all look yellow from the terrible lights in our rooms that you'd have on at night. Our livers are all just temporarily failing. I think is the.
Well, if you want to know why I'm not wearing glasses, folks, I'll show you why. So that's just not a good look.
Was it your credit card number I saw in that reflection?
Well, between you and myself, Richard, we've been gallivanting around the country a wee bit over the last couple of 3 weeks. You in particular, you've been Mr. Everywhere. David has been living the benign life down in Wellington, but we certainly, between the three of us, we've been all around the country over the last week or two.
Got to cover some miles for the job.
I just covered some miles as a retired person visiting friends and family.
Shut up, David.
Work to do.
Oh, classic. Right. Anyway, enough of that. We're going to move on and we're going to get through the news because I want to get to bed. I'm going to get on with my day. Right. Let's start with something that kicked on in the last 36 hours ago, I guess. The Reserve Bank has cut the OCR to 3.75%. The Reserve Bank has cut the official cash rate by 50 basis points to 3.75%, noting scope for more cuts this year if economic headwinds continue. And announcing the rate cut, the Monetary Policy Committee says annual consumer price inflation remains near the midpoint of the 1 to 3% target band. Economic activity in New Zealand remains subdued. Understatement of the day. With spare productive capacity, domestic inflation pressures continue to ease. Price and waging behaviours are adapting to a low inflation environment, which in other words means that prices are about the same and wages are going down. And the price of inputs has fallen, also contributing to lower headline inflation. The committee says economic growth is expected to recover during 2025. We damn well hope so. Lower interest rates will encourage spending, although elevated global economic uncertainty is expected to weigh on business investment decisions. They mean Trump. Higher prices for some of our key commodities and a lower exchange rate will increase export revenues. Employment growth is expected to pick up in the second half of the year as the domestic economy recovers. ANZ Bank was among banks to cut its floating home loan interest rates and savings rates following the Reserve Bank decision. ANZ New Zealand Managing Director for Personal, Grant Nuckley, says the cuts to floating and flexible rates will provide extra relief for customers who have yet to fix their home loans. That's a big one. I mean, I've spoken to two people who are somewhat excited because they are forced to refix components of their mortgage in the next couple of months, and this may have just given them a little bit of a leeway. Graham, people rushing in to spend their interest rate savings today?
Yeah, my son's happy. He's just bought a house, and so he fixed it for 6 months. So when that comes off, he's going to get a more favourable rate. I have to admit that I was surprised that it was a 0.5 and not a 0.25. I got that wrong, and quite a few pundits were expecting the 0.5 drop.
It's rare that 0.5s happen, though, really, isn't it?
It's happened twice. It's always been 0.25, but I have to say that is, in one respect, a good sign, and another a recognition of just how stalled the economy has become. I think there are some signs, though, that various bits are starting to change. There's a number of commentators are saying that the house price is probably at a soft landing for a bottoming out of the cycle. But yeah, it's still going to be a tough year. And Graham, you're closer to the action when it comes to car sales, and I think it's still a tough gig, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Probably the only disappointing thing about the announcement, and I don't mean to sound churlish about it, but I did take a bit of a turn at almost how gleeful Adrian Orr was about this. And I thought one of the underlying points with it just simply signifies what we've been saying for a little while. The economy really is in deep trouble. And we've been talking about on the show about, survive to 25, and now everyone's saying, and the banks are saying, well, actually what we meant was survive into 25, and we'll let you know at what point in time we can start saying you're doing okay. I think in some ways, I'd like to see more recognition from the Reserve Bank of just how deep that crater is. And I know that it's difficult to do so without scaring the horses, so to speak. But people are really feeling it, really deeply feeling it. And I think it loses some of its emphasis when they feel that the Reserve Bank governor is not sympathetic to the plight that a lot of New Zealanders are finding themselves in.
Well, he's not, in all honesty, Graham. I mean, this is a manufactured recession, as we've talked about, and
yes,
he's got a target in mind, and that's what he's gone after. And I think it's going to be a hard slog this year. We've talked about this before. When we compare it to the GFC, the fundamentals are quite different. The GFC was a recession that was generated offshore with the banking finance. Yes. Australia and New Zealand, our systems are a little bit better, so we survived that. It was a hard hit, but we came out of that not too badly. Whereas I think here it's taken much longer to bottom out than the GFC did, which suggests it's going to take quite a bit longer to come back out of it. Mm-hmm. So it's both deep, and you look at that we talk about wave periods. With big long periods versus short periods, this is a long period to go from peak to peak. So I think the soft landing in the economy might be flattening out for 3 or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months before we start to see it climb. But I'm hopeful that by the end of the year we're starting to climb out of this. I bet the current government is too, because it's election year next year.
Yeah, and I also think there's an element of this government is very much, arguably has some control over this manufactured recession. And I think there's been some soft pressure, certainly from some areas of the business community and from the political community, to blame it a little bit on Adrian Orr, to the point that there's been a few calls for him to be gone and all these kind of things. When I think that just detracts from the fact that a recession is a very complicated thing, and he has a remit he has to follow. It's not just about him doing what he can to fix the recession. There's other factors involved in that. One of them we've discussed before is sentiment and confidence, and the things that the government has been doing that may impact on that. I'm cautious to blame Adrian Orr for with the way the Reserve Bank acted over this recession.
Yeah, I guess I want to be clear. I wasn't blaming Adrian Orr. I was, I think, merely indicating he has a set of parameters to work to, and he's worked to them. So you can't blame him for that. That's his job. He's doing his job. But the government certainly felt it was needed. So let's hope he's done his job and things start to improve.
Yep, no, absolutely. Right, something that does, the one business that will be wanting to hope it improves is Colonial. Colonial recorded a 23.8% drop in half-year profit. The Colonial Motor Company has recorded a trading profit after tax of $6.9 million for the 6 months to December 2031, down 23.8% on the same period last year. The result was in line with the company's profit guidance update in February. Meanwhile, total revenue for the half-year period was up 2.6% year-on-year to $507.8 million. The board declared an unchanged, fully imputed interim dividend of 15 cents per share to be paid on March 31. Chair Ashworth says the result was better than anticipated at the time of the 2024 AGM in November, when the market and outlook appeared bleak. The second half of 2024 had largely lived up to that expectation, but a strong December result, assisted by continued prudent cost management, had seen the 6 months end on a poor positive note. The market remained subdued relative to the trading conditions over the past few months. So, yeah, tough times, but it sounds like they managed to trim some costs. and that potentially is being a bit of a saving grace there for them because,
their share price
their
share price indicates the drop in profit. It's been up and down, but I think they're in a strong position. I think the share price probably reflects the value of the company at the moment, but they've got a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about them a lot over the last few years when their results have come through. They're a staple of a well-run company. Have always struck me as being well managed, despite the times at hand. That result is, I suspect, reflective of the new car market, that the new truck market that they work in general. The fact that there's still a trading profit of a reasonable significance would tell you all you need to know about their management. So I think they should be possibly, there's a more positive tone to that than the drop in profit level would indicate.
Yeah,
I
guess the question
agree.
is, what have they had to throw out to that? I mean, when they say cost management, by and large, cost management means they've probably let staff go. Is one of the realities, and that's something the market's having to do to keep things moving forward. Right sizing, I believe, is the cynical term. Now, dealer principal off to Harvard through a scholarship. Southern Automobile's dealer principal Michelle Findlater has been named the 2025 recipient of the Janet Lane Scholarship through training organisation MITO and the Inspiring Futures Foundation. Findlater will use the scholarship to complete the Harvard Division of Continuing Education Certificate of Leadership, Excellence in Strategy and Innovation. The scholarship is awarded to a single individual each year to support an intensive and comprehensive course of management and leadership study. Named it to honour MITO's former long-standing Chief Executive Janet Lane. It is designed to enhance and accelerate opportunities for individuals whose development of leadership capabilities will have a significant impact on the performance, productivity, and profitability of the sector. Findlater has over 20 years of experience in the automotive sector. Prior to joining Southern Automobiles in 2024, she held senior roles at Scania NZ and GWD Motor Group and has demonstrated commitment to governance and leadership. So there we go. We have that's pretty impressive, heading off to
do something
with Harvard. It's well up. And look, also just want to note, another female doing incredibly well in the world of automotive. We have a story about to come out in the AutoTalk magazine, where we now have 5 of the brands in New Zealand are now led by women. It's certainly a change we've seen in the last few years, where we went from one popping up here and there to now having some really substantial companies and brands led with some strong female leadership. So great to be there. Of course, if this was America, Mr. Trump would be ranting against it. But
You had to get that in. I was waiting for a Trump gig somewhere, Richard.
Well, look, there goes the danger.
He'd have to stand in line with Elon Musk. He would make them redundant, get rid of them, close them down, wouldn't he?
Well, here's the thing, though. I've met all of those 5 brand leaders, and they are all incredibly talented people who are there on their own merits. And the problem being is when you've got Mr. Trump doing what he does with Mr. Musk, then it casts a dispersion on anyone who's in a role who doesn't happen to be a white male. So, yes. Anyway.
It's called the Trusk disease.
Yeah, makes your hair fall out and go sideways, I guess. Another profit, this one going largely into the pockets of dealers. MTF records $9.6 million full-year profit. Motor Finance is reporting an underlying profit after tax of $9.6 million for the 2024 financial year. Amid economic headwinds, the specialist lender saw 10% growth, finishing the financial year 24 with over $1.1 billion in receivables and total assets exceeding $1.2 billion. Chairman Mark Darrow credited the company's performance to its business model and strategic direction. In 2023 showcased our potential in favourable conditions. 2024 demonstrated our resilience against headwinds. Despite economic challenges, the company, along with our originators, performed extremely well. This is a testament to the strength of our model, our strategy, the commitment of our team, and the enduring trust of our customers, Darrow says. Now, why would you say would a finance company be doing well in this market? Well, from my layman's understanding, there's 2 elements to it. 1, you can't really borrow off your mortgage anymore. And 2, when the market's a bit dicey and things are a bit risky, your interest rates go up. And if you can be really good at picking who you lend to, then there's, an opportunity.
I think some of the credit probably should also go to Mark Darrow. I've known him; he's been at it for a long time, and he's increasingly become quite a sharp operator. He's had a lot of experience under his belt now, and I think he would know how to hone that company and how to sharpen it in tough times. That's almost bread and butter for him now. So, good job, Mark. I think you're doing a good job.
And just while we're on the subject of profits, I'll run through another couple of ones without putting them up. Geneva's profit is up 97% for Q3 year on year to 5.9 million. I would suggest for similar reasons. And Turners has lifted their financial year 25 profit guidance, with the customer now expecting a net profit before tax of at least $53 million, up from its previous forecast of exceeding 50 million. It's set to be the firm's fifth consecutive record result and 8% ahead of the $49.1 million net profit before tax achieved in the previous financial year. It says its continued growth. It continues to grow due to a diversified business model, clear strategy, and a focus on customers. And I guess we go back to the point with that is that if their car sales are down, well, then potentially their finance and insurance profits from dealers are up, or vice versa. If the wind blows one way, they've probably got a business heading in that direction. So the joy of being a big group, really.
I was going to say, looking at this, I was going to suggest the idea that we're not so much seeing growth in the finance pie overall, but the three players you mentioned, for example, have probably been very aggressive in their sectors, very good at growing their particular share of the market, and it's probably coming at the expense, perhaps, of some other players. We'd be interested to see what the results overall are. I don't get the sense that the finance books are growing as a sector overall. I believe there's been a degree of retraction, despite what we're talking about with mortgages. I think that ship's long since sailed. But I do sense that the good are getting better at what they do, and those that are not, some of the names we've probably talked about in the past, are perhaps scratching their heads a wee bit, thinking what they can try and do to get back on the wagon again.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the New Zealand market, sorry, you want to say something, David?
I was just going to say we've mentioned this quite often, but Turners are consistently good, aren't they? And I think Todd's running that team really well.
Yes.
I saw an interesting thing they were doing the other day, and that up to the north of Auckland, north, there isn't a Turners outlet. And so what they do now is they have I guess you'd call it a clinic, once a week at a VTNZ station, where you can go along and they'll value your car and you can sell your car to Turners, which is an interesting one. I'm not sure if that's a trial or whether that's broader spread, but that's an interesting move. Move.
So they have been one of the success stories of I suppose vertical integration of all the aspects of a dealership or a vehicle business. And there are, obviously, in terms of the numbers, that you'd say they're definitely the most successful financially, but Todd's worked really hard at bringing all the different facets of the automotive business into the one. And it's been a genius move, because they really do control now every aspect of their business, from the entry of a motor vehicle to the final exit point at the end of a finance contract. It's all controlled within the group and with group products that contribute. And it's the first time, I think, in New Zealand we've seen it at this particular level, when it's managed well, how successful it can be.
Do you think that their approach to making sure that local sourcing is a fairly big part of their business model probably helps with their stability, because they're just less susceptible to the headwinds between us and Japan, basically?
Yeah, and I think that was, I don't know whether that was by design or just a happy accident, where previously their role as almost a drop point for some of the lease companies, and a lot of the lease companies had their own sites. You sort of think back to the days at Asander and things like that. They had their own dealership networks, and they've been absorbed now, and by and large been absorbed into the Turners Group, whether it's through direct purchasing or it's just acting as an agent. But it's given Turners a really unique edge into that New Zealand new stock that previously would go out to the non-franchise dealer market. So you think about how we as dealers buy motor vehicles. If the franchise dealers weren't retaining their own trades or their own lease returns or rentals, for example, going out into the wider pool of dealers around New Zealand for retail sale. Well, I know now as a retail dealer, for example, I know how hard it is to buy that stock. It's really tough to buy. It just doesn't even turn up for sale. And so Turners have managed to capture a really significant part of that market of sort of 3, 4, 5, 7-year-old Kiwi new stock that we just don't even see turning up on the wholesale market. It's just not available. It's been absorbed into the Turners group, and as a result, I see a highly profitable part of their business because you literally don't have a lot of choice.
Well, so one or two, if you go beyond the lease company aspect, when buy now, their buy now product came around, I initially thought, oh, geez, it's going to be a whole pile of pretty end of life stuff getting some pretty bargain prices. But now when you look at the fact they're doing things like this at this BTNZ and how much they've marketed that service, I wonder if it's not just that kind of stuff they're getting through, and if maybe that's becoming a viable supply channel for some marketable cars. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and it is. We compete as dealers. We compete against their business for the trades as well. Although, to be fair, I choose my words carefully. I don't always think that the value that they place in a vehicle is necessarily representative of the total value a consumer might expect for it. But like any business, if you turn up and you say, I'd like to sell my car, and they give you a price, it's up to you to accept it. It's also up to you and on you to decide whether you think that's good value or not. And the Turners model in that respect, I think still to an extent harks back or feeds back to a little bit of the old days of the auction banner, where people get the sense that that's the market value of the vehicle that they're offering, as opposed to it's now a core business and it's not necessarily revolving around the value to the consumer. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's a bit of a change around in how that's represented. Whereas when we're trading a vehicle at a dealership like us, it's a bit of a different mechanism. And people have got that sort of expectation that they were a dealer as opposed to a car buying service. It's just a little bit different.
Yeah, I think they put a lot of effort into the element of trust that people hold in Turners. So, well, I think most people when they go in there know that they're probably getting not necessarily the extreme high price, but they probably know that it's simple, quick, in the door, out there you go, no risk, money in your pocket. Yeah, easy. It's an interesting strategy. Right, we have another brand coming into New Zealand. GAC Motor has indicated it's coming to New Zealand through an interesting way. The new country manager decided to talk about it on LinkedIn, and before the company actually announced it, we saw the post and popped this up. Chinese brand GAC Motor's arrival in the New Zealand market appears to have begun with the appointment of a new executive to lead the brand here. Urgent Bao, also known as David, announced his appointment as national manager on LinkedIn today. This was last week. In his announcement, Bao says he's excited about his new role, which is a significant step up from his previous sales positions, most recently at Andrew Sims Botany. I'm excited to share that I have joined GAC Motor as the national manager. I look forward to this new journey and the opportunity to contribute to the brand's growth and success. I'm grateful for the support from my colleagues and mentors along the way. Excited for what's ahead. GAC, which partners with Toyota in China, has already indicated that its Aeon range of electric and hybrid SUVs will arrive in Australia in mid-2025. In a busy year for new Chinese brands, with Elite Motor landing production vehicles Smart returning to the market. Their launch was today in Auckland, and Deepal rumoured to be arrived later in the year. We reached out to David for comment at the time that we spoke. This was written, he hadn't come back to us, but we've since spoke to him. A relatively short career in the market for someone who's running a brand now. Started selling used imports in 2018. He was working for Mitsubishi dealer, and then he was essentially running through the sales cadets program in the Jeep department at Andrew Sims, and suddenly he's running a Chinese brand. So good on him. It's a accelerated career path, I guess. He must be a prodigy.
A new month, a new brand. Welcome to New Zealand. Anything to declare, sir? Oh, another motor vehicle brand. Left lane for you, nothing to declare.
I do wonder how many more we can absorb.
Yeah, well, the question is which ones are going to leave. Yeah.
Or which ones are
Now,
going to make it upon introduction?
well, I'm in no way linking the two topics, but Nissan and Honda dump merger plans. Nissan and Honda have agreed to terminate the Memorandum of Understanding signed on December 23, 2024 to consider a business integration between the two companies. The brands released a statement on February 13, 2024 saying the merger would not proceed, but the earlier cooperation agreement around electrified vehicles would remain in place. Since signing the MOU, the management teams of both companies, including the chief executive officers, have discussed and considered the surrounding market environment, the objectives of the business integration and the management strategies and structures post-integration. Additionally, considering the importance of business integration, blah, 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 blah. I think they got together and worked out they have entirely different cultures, and it was going to be pretty difficult to merge them together because it's a bit harder than slapping a Honda badge, slapping a Nissan badge on a Honda CRV and slapping a Honda badge on a Nissan Navara. It's
well, they used to do that, so it's not like there's never been a precedent for doing that. Well, those owners out there of Isuzu Askas might have something to say about that. I do wonder whether, I don't want to cast some shade upon Nissan, but I do wonder whether Honda had a look and said, you know what, in terms of being a strong partner here, this is possibly not the best solution for us.
They looked under the hood, saw an early generation Nissan CVT and walked away.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, Nissan's quite big in the US and a couple of other places. So is Honda. I think mergers are quite difficult. It would be much easier from a cultural perspective if one takes the other over. I know from my time at the MIA, talking to brands that were in a strategic alliance, that's challenging enough because they talk about sharing information about platforms and then saying, you know, this brand might focus on doing these and this brand focus on doing that. But it's all done as a strategic alliance, and you leave the culture within each of the companies intact. If you do a merger, you've got to assimilate the two, and I think a merger was always going to be really challenging. If you do a takeover, that's altogether different. And I don't think either company was strong enough to do a takeover. Nissan has a bit of resilience to it, so I wouldn't expect to see it disappear. Well, not in the short term. Anything's possible in the medium to longer term, though.
I want to know what's going on with Mitsubishi because they seem to be the basket case, and they kind of touched base with Nissan and swapped a few parts, and then they seem to be sitting off and not being part of this sudden collapse of Nissan, and then they seem to be quite happy. I think they're in a bit of a happier position at the moment. They're not as massively entwined in the American market as the other two are. And I think that's the problem for these companies at the moment, is the American market.
Yes, I think that's probably right, yes.
Well, as I understand it, David, you're talking about Nissan and United States. I stand to be corrected, but I believe this is one of the central issues, is that Nissan is not performing well in the United States at all. And this is one of the central issues they're facing.
They're still selling a lot of vehicles in the US, but they're not selling them at a rate that they would like to, or at the profit margin they would like to. Yes,
they're not the profitable vehicles that they're selling. Unfortunately, they've ended up with a market of selling largely very budget cars, and their trucks aren't selling. Their premium stuff isn't really selling. They sell a lot of old TVs.
There's nothing wrong with their premium stuff. It's just hasn't attracted buyers.
Ford president says Asia and Europe would benefit from tariffs. Ford President Jim Farley says implementing a 25% tariff on the Canadian and Mexico borders would benefit Asian and European rivals and blow a hole in the US automotive industry. According to various international media organizations, Farley told a press conference with analysts in Detroit that Donald Trump's tariff push has so far brought a lot of costs and a lot of chaos, despite his aims to keep the industry. Frankly, it gives free rein to South Korean, Japanese, and European companies bringing 1.5 million to 2 million vehicles into the US that wouldn't be subject to those Mexican and Canadian tariffs. It would be one of the biggest windfalls for those companies ever, Farley says. Meanwhile, we're USMCA compliant with almost all our content, finished vehicles and components going across the borders, to have the kind of a size of tariff would be devastating. Analyst says Ford is less exposed to fallouts from tariffs on Canada and Mexico than General Motors or Stellantis, the parent company of brands such as Jeep and Dodge. More of Ford's manufacturing base is located within the US, and the vehicles it imports from outside the country can be less profit-rich than the products its rivals import. Ford sources 90% of the steel from within the US, and most of its aluminium is also produced locally. So yes, problematic there. I think we've kind of discussed this previously, that the Japanese and the Koreans that have plants in America are getting off pretty easily on the tariff side of thing when Ford and GM chase cheaper stuff either side of the border. But the interesting now is we're seeing that Trump's putting in this reciprocal tariff agreement. So rather targeting specific countries and targeting specific areas, what he's doing is saying, well, if you are charging us a 5% tariff, we'll charge you a 5% tariff. So provided South Korea and Japan keep their tariffs low, then the tariffs back will be the same.
And to be fair to Trump, although I think in the first when he threatened the 25% tariff, that was just going to be disastrous, and Foley was right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a bad move. If you remember, in his first term, he put tariffs on product coming out of Europe and in the EU, complained bitterly. But what a lot of people didn't realise was that he was only matching, then adding a little bit more than what the EU was already doing to the US. So he was readdressing the problem. But getting into tariff wars is a poor outcome for consumers. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. We could end up copying it too, though, in that he's considered value-added tax or GST as a tariff on things. So it'll be interesting to see how he sees our GST and whether he slap a 15% tax back. The only being is that, I don't know if he necessarily understood the situation when he was talking about this in the press conference that I was watching. But of course, that's no different to most of the states in America running a sales tax, really. So,
very much.
He's been calling that as a VAT or GST as equivalent to a tariff, when it's the exact same thing as what's being done at the statewide level. You're a federal level, but don't punish us for what's essentially a state thing versus a federal thing.
And he would be technically and logically incorrect calling it a tariff, because it's not. It's a tax. No. As a tax, but just the way it's levied is slightly different. It's certainly not a tariff.
One of the interesting aspects that will come out of this reciprocal tariff discussion, this is assuming these things go ahead, and I'm sure a man like Mr. Trump has thought of this already, of course, but it actually pitches you back to a true trading market. And one of the great fears, I guess, that Americans must surely have, and they think about this a bit longer, is that some nations out there are just better at making, building, mining, manufacturing and shipping products than Americans. And if you have a reciprocal tariff arrangement only, it actually pitches you back at the mercy of some of the nations who you fear for their manufacturing prowess in terms of cost cutting on products and managing to sell them. And the obvious one in the room there is the Chinas of the world and other nations that have a lower manufacturing cost base. If their tariffs are merely a reciprocal arrangement, then you are literally at the mercy of your nation's ability to continue to produce the products. The outcome may not be the best for consumers there either.
And I don't think it's necessarily going to be
consumers, but not so good for the American producers of the competing products.
He also suspects it's going to be, instantly fix a lot of things, like let's tariff Chinese cars. They will build factories in America to build their cars. Well, the reality is that it probably takes 5 to 10 years from woe to go to start and establish a new manufacturing plant in a new country. And I think a lot of these people are going to be pretty pragmatic about this stuff and go, well, the chance of, the Republicans may be around in 4 years' time, but the chance of Trump being around in 4 years' time is 0. And so maybe we just sit here and wait.
The interesting thing is
that may be the situation in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, if you want to follow this in the US from a consumer's perspective, just follow the debate on the price of eggs.
Yeah.
That's made for some good memes, I'll give it that.
They are very expensive. Very expensive. And apparently it's Biden's fault because he killed all the chickens, which means he must have invented bird flu. So, yeah.
I tell you what, this will be the story that'll keep on giving. That Trump and the automotive sector and tariffs will be the story that gives on giving for a very, very long time. But I agree with you, Richard. I think that the Chinese manufacturers looking over their shoulder at this will be very much looking at a long game. And if you look at the way the New Zealand market, as we've assumed, we've been a test bed for quite some time now for distribution on a wider scale. That was the original plan, if you like. That the pricing structure that the Chinese models have brought to the New Zealand landscape and how that's changed expectation to an extent on what a new car is actually costing. Assuming that that's a real cost of the vehicle and a real cost to manufacture it, ship it and sell it, it's still, even with tariffs into the United States market, must send shivers down the spine of many a big three or a big 3.5 dealership owner.
Mm-hmm. I think it also fundamentally misunderstands why companies build cars in America. So you've seen a number, I'm sure you've got the early Japanese and Korea plants that went there because there used to be tariffs. There aren't so much more there now. But you look at the likes of BMW, Mercedes, all that kind of thing, and even some of the other brands have gone to build truck plants down in Texas, blah, 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 blah. They build them there because if you're trying to sell 500,000 cars into a market every year, it becomes cheaper to build it in America and pay American wages than it does to ship them halfway around the world.
Yeah.
It's not just down to tariffs. So, yeah. Anyway.
What's the space?
Yeah. Now, a little bit of a fun one, an interesting one at the same time. I went underground last week, a long way underground. I was down in the South Island on the launch of the BYD Shark 6, which we've talked about plenty on this podcast. Other than to say, Graham, I've now driven the production version, and they have mostly, pretty much entirely fixed the suspension issues we're talking about. That thing feels pretty good on the, still a ute, but feels a lot more like an SUV than a ute as such. But while we're there, they surprised us by doing what I think is the first launch of a car in the powerhouse of the Manapuri power station. So for those who don't know, the Manapuri power station basically takes a lake up in the mountains and runs it through a series of pipes down to sea level at doubtful sound. If running at full speed, produces enough power to run 600,000 homes. But at the moment, we use it to melt aluminium for the Australians. Australians or Americans? I think Australian.
Both.
No? Anyway.
Both.
Both.
Until the tariff on aluminium into America hits.
Yes. And so, we'll just put AI service centers in there then. We went down and saw a car underground. That power station was noisy, very hot, very impressive. Built in the 60s, interestingly by GE Canada. And what a crazy place to go! An amazing, interesting facility. Good car. I'll let you read about it. We'll go to EVs and Beyond. You can watch my video on it.
Down to Manapuri before?
What's that, Graham?
Had you been to Manapuri power station before? Had you been?
I've been to Manapuri, the lake, but not the power station.
Yeah, I've been to the power station. Interesting tunneling through the rock, the granite, the bedrock. It is.
Yes.
It was an engineering feat that they did. It was slow progress, but it's solid. It's going to last a long time, and it generates a lot of power.
They have
when
New Zealand.
Age 11, I think it was. We did the tour, did the ferry across. But sadly, and again, it's more of a point for those watching this particular podcast. Unfortunately, they've ceased tours back in, was it 2020 or 19 or 20? They've ceased tours for
somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah, reasons of potential safety breaches or potential that something bad could happen. Who knows? And you can no longer take a tour, and it would appear that there's no intention anytime soon to have that addressed. So you can see it from the outside, but you can no longer take the bus tour down into the depths of the power station and watch those turbines spin.
Yes. And they've got New Zealand's only Renault Twizzys down there.
Yeah, I've been into the powerhouse. I've been in the powerhouse at Minapuri and Hoover Dam, and as
Built by the same
impressive
people.
as yeah, but as impressive as the Hoover Dam is, and it is pretty damn impressive. I felt this was a tougher engineering feat because of where it was and what they had to drill through.
Yes, yes. But you know, it's the same people who did the Hoover Dam that did the thing. And then we mentioned it earlier, but just a quick view: Smart returns New Zealand as an EV brand. Smart brand returns New Zealand as an EV-only passenger brand designed by Mercedes. The Smart brand offers performance tuning by Bribus, the beat sound system with 12 speakers, and an artificial intelligence AI-powered avatar for voice-controlled interaction. So there you go, another brand. And then I was over in Australia the last few days. And I was over in Australia for the last few days at the launch for the first vehicle that's coming to New Zealand for Geely. So, yeah, who owns Smart, of course, or was one of the major owners of Smart. They also had Zika that I was up there with last year, and yeah, lots going on. Right, well, that's it. I have to go to bed. I mean, I'm going to have a morning coffee. Graham, you have to go and sell some cars.
I'll go back to reading my books.
Polish your motorcycle or something like that.
Something equally interesting, yeah. Back to we go into the trade. And
interestingly, as I got more busy with work, I lost my appetite for recreational reading, and it's taken until now, and I sort of finished work, 18 months ago. It's taken until now for me to get my appetite for recreational reading back. So I think I'm well and truly now settling back into just a cruisy lifestyle, Graham.
Those of you that know me may or may not realize I'm in the process of writing a book about a particular aspect of the transport industry in New Zealand. And over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've had a couple of lengthy interviews, one up in Dargaville and one down in Waiuku of some older transport figures, well retired, one in his 80s, the one yesterday he was in his 90s, and what was supposed to be a sort of a 20-minute audio recording and some notes and showing some photos of a bit of history turned in each case to 2.5 hours worth of just the funniest stories. And every time you think you've heard it all in a dealership or these are transport companies, man, I've got the stories for you. And quite a few times yesterday we had to stop. He said, look, you just got to stop recording. I just can't have you record the story. Boy, they got up to some hijinks. Real interesting stuff in terms of New Zealand's transport history. I'm hearing about. Very privileged indeed. So that's my little bit of winter entertainment to try actually finish this bloody thing.
And of course, their logbooks were totally accurate.
Completely. I think there's some stories about
logbooks.
I can say this. As a fresh-faced 26-year-old in the UK, when I was over there driving trucks for a company that I can't mention or name, but I used to do intercontinental hotshot freight work for them, less than load, and may or may not have carried 2 spare taco discs in a little side pocket in my bag.
I think the roof light's kind of gone these days. We were filming a car down at Whitford the other week, and a truck pulled up behind us from a significant transport brand, parked his truck, and turned off the engine. And we were wanting to have him to move because we were filming in the spot. I think he quite realised he did nothing wrong. Asked me to move, and he said, "Look, I would really like to, but I've pushed the button now. This thing can't move for a centimetre for I can't remember what the time was." And he said, "Yeah, all the digital stuff now, a bit trickier." Apparently, didn't stop that New Zealand Post truck driver wandering all over the road a few weeks ago here in Kaiwaka. And
that was a shocker to watch. That really was. I imagine his having some interesting conversations about his employment, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I was following a truck into Masterton yesterday, and he was going all over the place. It was wandering. I passed him, and then I got into a petrol station. I was filling up diesel into the ute, and then he pulls up behind me, and it's a pretty heavy load. So I said to him, "Oh, that looks like a heavy load." He said, "Oh yeah, it's too heavy for the truck. It's pushing me around." And I thought, okay, if he was put on the scales by the police, he would fail. But it certainly pushed the truck around. It surprised me. I mean, he was using the whole road on some corners.
Yes, yeah. Tell me if I'm wrong, Graham, but I feel like there's some situations where and you'll understand this more than I would, where while it is legal, some operators might put loads behind a truck that, well legal, well certifiable, aren't necessarily entirely safe or are smart for the truck itself. Like when I see a truck crawling up a hill at about 20 kilometers an hour, arguably for that much weight, shouldn't they have a few more horsepower behind it to be safe?
Well, David can probably answer that better than I can. Apart from, I don't believe there's a horsepower index as such. Apart from
that's what I'm suggesting.
Good business sense. And look, if you're an operator and it may be an operator that runs around town that's got the occasional call to go and do a job that he thought might be ending up in Silverdale that actually turns out to be in Waipu or further north of Whangarei, and has to crawl at the Rinderwins, didn't expect that. But these days, it's all about individual axle loading, and these operators know exactly what needs to go across every single axle at every single point on the weighbridge, because, to be fair, the fines and the consequences are just too great to do otherwise. Of any halfway reputable operator, you just can't get away with it.
It's not about the engineless speed, although going downhill it is important to keep that under control. It's vehicle dimension and vehicle mass, and how they are carried by each axle, and each of the axle sets have got load settings on them. And then it comes down to load stability in terms of how it is positioned on the vehicle. So those are the things that are important. Horsepower as such, probably not as important. But if you see a new truck, for example, loaded and really struggling, then you can guess that they're probably operating at the maximum limits. Some of the trucks
outside
the trucks that I followed yesterday, high productivity trucks, it just never ceased to amaze me. I know what my vehicle does speed wise, and these trucks were traveling at 95 to 98 kilometers an hour and sped up at the bottom of the hill to get up to the hill, so they're still doing over 95k. And that's what distresses me a little bit, because every kilometre over the speed limit with the weights that those things are doing, it's the fourth power rule in terms of road impact and damage. It made me question whether there was enough police presence on the road to catch these blighters that were clearly speeding. I had a truck, I was doing exactly 100 kilometres an hour on my vehicle, and this truck was I'd come up to behind it at a roadwork stop. We went through the roadworks, and then he just pulled away from me. And I thought, I'm doing 100 and he's pulling away from me. That's what I find disturbing.
And he's supposed to, and his limit's 90.
It is, exactly. Yeah. It was a high productivity vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, we are supposed to look at the industry, and we talk about trucks, and we said this would be a short episode, and we're letting it go long, but it's because we have so much fun. Anyway,
I'll go and have brunch now.
Yeah, catch everyone next week for another maybe next week, who knows, I might be flying somewhere, for another AutoTalk weekly wrap.